What's happening, folks? Back with another reaction, back with a journey that has been waiting for a while, and once again this comes from Robert, so I wanted to thank him both for the comprehensive musical selections he sent me, meaning he sent me material from Benny and Bjorn from ABBA, and there's a whole list of subfolders, and the same has happened here with Kylie Minogue. Am I pronouncing the surname correctly? I think that's right, but do let me know if I'm incorrect here. This is a name I've seen going way back. I don't know if the late 80s is when I first heard of her, but this opening album is from 88, so yeah, it's a name I'd say I've heard from at least the 90s when I was a teenager, but it's never an artist that I think I've heard directly. It's just one that I've known through, public reputation or ubiquity in pop culture. But yes, if she started in the 80s, and given that it seems like she's very much in the pop vein, I would immediately wonder whether we're going to hear some synth pop. I will note that Robert sent what seemed like selections from a lot of her albums, meaning this opening album, just called Kylie, so more or less self-titled, seems to have only 4 tracks in the folder. So my expectation is that there are essentially notable and choice selections from these different albums and folders. So yes, for the time being, that is the plan, to go through some selections across the course of her catalog. And the opening tune, do I have this right? Is it We Should Be or I Should Be? Yes, I Should Be So Lucky. So yes, I looked on the Discogs master release for this album, and this does seem to be the actual opening track. In any case, I like the phrasing, meaning you say the phrase, should be so lucky, when some people are not so lucky, meaning if one person has a certain type of success or navigation through some difficult issue, you might say we should all be so lucky, suggesting that many people do not achieve that success or are not able to navigate those circumstances as well or as comfortably as the person in question. So I should be so lucky sounds like the narrator referring to some other people or person who has done something, experienced something, or felt something in a way that maybe does not match with the speaker's experience herself. So yeah, it's a clever phrasing for a track, and that there's already a suggestion of a disparity between one experience and another, and maybe the other is more positive than that of the narrator. Either way, as I said, this is from 1988, so I'm wondering what type of sonics we'll hear. I've talked about it in a lot of deep dives, a lot of groups or artists that in the first half of the 80s had a more, let's say, electronic synth pop flavor. By the time you get to the second half of the 80s, funk and soul and some other styles end up infusing their work. So someone starting in 88, I wonder where we're starting sonically or in terms of subgenre. In any case, I'll give it a listen. This is Kylie Minogue. The track is I Should Be So Lucky, and it's the opening tune of her 1988 album, Kylie.
Do
that's a lot of fun. A final point before I get to the majority of my thoughts. There were a couple backing vocals. I assume that's all Kylie. It's just like layered vocals from her. But there were a couple backing vocals in the latter stages of the tune that when they first started, I was like, wait, is that a saxophone? But I think they were just so sonorous and melodically flourishing that for a half moment it sounded like a saxophone, but I think it was just her backing vocals. So number one, it's definitely that 80s fun type of synth pop, like more overtly electric, meaning it didn't quite have the, soulful, funky sounds that I thought it might given 88. Now, of course, I have no prior knowledge of her catalog, but in any case, the point is I enjoy a lot of the electronic sonics, that cycling and vibrant synth bass line at the base of the track. I enjoy those kind of big, bright synth chords melodically in the higher end of the track. There was even, it was like sparingly used, but there were a couple moments where I heard it almost like this crystalline or glass little keyboard run, not unlike a synth xylophone, in that it sounded both struck slash percussive and melodic at the same time. Again, a small ingredient. It was not pervasive throughout the track, but I did hear that. And I enjoy that cycling percussive rhythm, like drum rhythm that was, part of the energy of the tune. I think she has very nice vocals, and again, I like the way they were layered in the latter stages of the track. And it's interesting because there's a bit of a dichotomy between the bright, fun, almost uplifting style sonics, or the atmosphere of the sonics, with the lyrics, which I suppose they're not sad, but there is this disparity. And in fact, the disparity between the, I should be so lucky, is between the life she would love to live, the life she's living only in fantasy, and her actual life, where she knows that she doesn't even have the attention of this other person. Never mind having their love. They don't even really notice her. And so it's like she's in love with this guy. She's, dreaming about him telling her that he loves her, but she knows, she's very aware she's just dreaming. And it sounds like there's no immediate expectation that this is going to change anytime soon. And I was thinking it's almost like that bright, warm, like happy feeling of the sonics. It gives off a bit of fantasy. It gives off this sense of, she's in a dream world, and that's the only place where she can find this jubilant, fun feeling. Whereas in reality, again, there's this disconnect between her and this guy that she has these feelings for. So it's an unrequited love, it's an unrealized love. And again, based on what I heard in the lyrics, it doesn't sound like she's on the verge of changing that. She's aware that, she's just kind of daydreaming about this, and she'd love it to be the case, but as far as she knows, there's nothing coming back the other way. So I like how even sonically it feels like a fantasy, and I do enjoy also how, again, she's not sad about it, but she's under no delusion, and even the phrase, "I should be so lucky," suggests that, she's, not only is she not there now, but maybe, the way fortune has crumbled, the way that fate has cast things in reality is such that she may never know that love. She may never have that relationship that she wants to have. So it's a cleverly written tune. As I said, I think her vocals are very nice. It's not, she's not belting massively, but as I said, in the end of the track, I like not only the layering of vocals, but especially those backing vocals, which have this almost sax-style swagger to them. So, yeah, a very cool opener, and one that does sound like the fun 80s as I remember them, which is to say, anyone who's found this reaction for Kylie specifically and doesn't know my channel, this is sort of the way I do things. I just play music as if I were putting a record on the turntable. I think about it, I talk about it, and in the end, I frame it through my own experiences, even as I try to approach it on its own terms. And, I was born in 1980, so I was a single-digit kid throughout the 80s. I was then a preteen and teenager throughout the 90s. So a lot of my references and associations, which when I listen to someone for the first time, again, I try to approach it as much I can, as much as I can, on its own terms, but inevitably I make comparisons based on groups and artists that I know. So a lot of my touchstones or reference points come from the 80s and 90s when I was a single-digit kid and a teenager, because those are the formative years of me listening to music, being exposed to genres, and, you know, finding my own interests and tastes. So yes, it has that fun 80s synth pop quality. It definitely feels like something that, you know, is very dance floor friendly. It's not exactly like a four to the floor, you know, kick drum, fist pumping type of tune. It's more of like a lighter synth pop dance type of track. But I very much enjoyed the stylings I heard. Looking forward to more. Thank you once again to Robert. Let me know what you think, and I will see you next time. Peace.